Good morning, everyone. Today, in this lecture, we will discuss about the news headlines. We will cover the definition of news headlines, the styles of news headlines, the functions of news headlines, and the various types of news headlines. So we begin with the basic definition of news headlines. Headlines catch the eye of a reader in search of something interesting in a newspaper. After scanning the headlines, a reader settles down to read the news story in detail. So a headline is the window to accompanying story. It first attracts the attention of the readers, hold their interest, and then tells them about the news story. A headline should attract the reader's attention. It should try to summarize the story. It depicts the mood of the story. It helps set the tone of the newspaper, and it provides adequate typographic relief to the readers. The above mentioned points are the functions of news headlines. Not all the headlines accomplish all these functions, but good headlines perform as many functions as possible. Headline styles. Most headlines are set in a single line or deck, but increasingly headlines are being set in 2 and even 3 decks. The most used headline style are the hanging indentions, the inverted pyramid, and the pyramid format. Hanging indentation can be right aligned or it can be left aligned. Inverted pyramid pattern follows the same inverted pyramid style of writing, as well as the pyramid format is also very common in the newspapers. The news headline types. Depending upon the content, headline can be divided into 3 main types. These are the label headlines, the active headlines, and the impressionist headlines. Label headlines. When the headline just indicates the class or the type of the event that is described in the news, it is called the label headlines. Here are some examples given, like in Parliament today. It is not summarizing the story, it is just putting a label on the story so that the reader can get an idea of what the story is all about. Likewise, there are more examples like the city notes, obituary, radio program, UNO decisions, Supreme Court today. The label headlines are generally used for regular columns. Active headlines. These headlines are informative, get to main point of the story, and usually contain an active verb. These are considered to be the ideal headlines, and all newspapers should learn to write active headlines. Active headlines are possible for all types of news stories, including the fillers. Example, IAF airlift stranded passengers. BJP changes strategy in Bengal. Acharya gets bail. Rupees 5.7 lakh looted. So these all are examples of active headlines. The third one is the impressionist headlines. Some headlines are used not so much to transfer information, but to convey the mood. For example, tension in Meerut. India does it again. Terror in South Delhi. Kashmir chills, Shimla perspires. These all are setting mood of the story, and that is why they are called the impressionist headlines. Depending upon the structure and arrangement, headlines can be of many types. Some of them are described below with examples. Cross-line or single-line headlines. It does not always span the full width of the page, but does cover all the columns of the story to which it pertains. The headlines may touch the extreme left and right of the news story, or it may be placed in the middle of the story. Most headlines are of this type, which are in a centralized pattern. This is one example of cross-line or single-line headline. The next one is the 2-line or double cross-line headline. Headline is long and is adjusted in 2 lines. Normally, such headlines are used for stories of more than 1 column width. 3 options are available. Both the lines can touch the extreme left and right of the story, or both can be centralized, or one can be flush and the other can be centralized. So normally upper line is flush and the second line is centralized. Here are three examples of two-line or double cross-line headlines. One is the centralized format, the second one is in a flush form, and the third one is the flush centralized form. The examples are also given here. Next is the inverted pyramid headline. There are more than two lines in the headline, and top one is the widest and the width of the line tapers towards the vertex down, thereby forming an inverted pyramid. Generally, there are three lines in this type of headline. Rarely there can be four, but never more than four. Such headlines are given to important stories with many important points. Such stories are of many columns wide. Next, here is one example of inverted pyramid style of headline. Next, we come to drop line headline. This type of headline has two or three lines and arrangements of the line look like a staircase. The top line is flush left. Second line begins a little bit away from the left extreme and ends a little after the first line. The third line begins from a little towards left from where the second line has started and ends more towards right than the second line. Inverted stairway headline. This is just opposite to the drop line headlines. Next is the hanging headline. In this case, all the lines of the headlines are flushed either left or right. First line takes the entire width of the news, but rest of the lines can take variable width. Here are two examples of hanging headlines. The next one is rectangle and square indentions. These are commonly used in America and European countries. In these headlines, they're using 3-4 lines headlines and arranging them in a rectangular or square format. Next one is the waistline headline, which looks like a waist. Both the top and the bottom line are wide and equal, but central line is narrow and small. Next one is the skeleton headline. In some cases, just above the main headline, a minor headline is added in smaller case with a rule that is a line under it. These are called the skeleton headline. Banner headline, which is commonly used in the lead news stories. These are spread across all the columns of the front page. These usually shout the news about and are used while covering very important stories. These are the attention grabbers. It sets the full page width at the top of the news page to draw the attention at the lead story. This is one example of banner headlines. The next is the kicker headline. Kicker headline is a short line of display type, usually in a half or less point size than the headline, and placed above the main part of the headline. Some newspapers call the kicker as the eyebrow or the tagline. These are also called as a tagline which introduce the headline, can be underlined for emphasis. Here is one example of kicker headline. Next is the stat headline. Stat headline is a standing headline which is used continuously issue after issue. It is used for regular or recurring content such as sports and film review columns. It does not change from issue to issue. Example, film review. Next is the reverse plate headline. It is set in reverse, that is, the letters are printed in white on a black background. Here is one example of reverse plate headline. Next is the reverse kicker. Reverse kicker is a line set in a larger type sizes and placed above the main headline. It is called a hammer or barker. So these were the types of headlines which are commonly seen in a newspaper. Thank you.